Again, all praises are due to Allah, highest of honors to His holy and divine Prophet, Noble Drew Ali. At this time, I ask that everyone please turn to chapter 30, the Moorish Holy Quran. Holy instructions from the Prophet, the social duties. When everybody is there, say Islam. Islam. It's due to Allah. As is customary in all Moorish Science Temple of America, to begin measure with the words from the Prophet. Islam. It reads, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, by way of Allah the Beneficent, the most merciful. When thou considereth thy wants, when thou beholdeth thy imperfections, acknowledge His goodness, O Son of humanity, who honored thee with humanity, endowed thee with speech, and placed thee in society to receive and confer reciprocal helps and mutual obligations, protection from injuries, thy enjoyment of the comforts and the pleasures of life. All these thou owest to the assistance of others, and couldst not enjoy but in the bands of society. Islam? Islam. It is thy duty, therefore, to be a friend to mankind. It is thy interest that man should be friendly to thee. As the rose breatheth sweetness from its own nature, so the heart of a benevolent man produceth good works. Islam? Islam. He enjoyeth the ease and tranquility of his own breast, and rejoiceth in the happiness and prosperity of his neighbor. Islam? Islam. Civilizations are measured by the accomplishments and the innovations developed as a collective, internally. I want to speak on just a few of those elements, and I'm going to write them down just so you can follow me. So those are just a few elements that make up a prosperous society. You have the arts, social, political structure, you have a strong economy, a monetary system, education, defense, of course, and the science. Islam? Islam. When we think of great civilizations, great ancient civilizations, these few of many components come to mind. Islam? Islam. When we speak of the Moorish Divine and National Movement, and when we define what the Moorish Divine and National Movement is, it's first and foremost, it's predicated by our divine constitution and bylaws, by way of Salvation Allah and unity, all the way to the Moorish Science Temple of America, home office, Noble Drew Ali, etc., etc. But in that in particular, when we deal with Act 6, it reads that with us all Moorish Americans must proclaim their nationality, and we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are part and impartial of this said government, and know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians. Islam? Islam. All right? So that encompasses the Moorish Divine and National Movement. And we go by demonstrating that through Islamism. And we go by demonstrating our Islamism as Moorish Americans, generally speaking, by way of our 5 principles: love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Islam? All right. And also a part, I thought I had it on me, but that's fine. Also in part, when we speak of what this Moorish Divine and National Movement is, we need not look any further than on the back of our Quran questions, where it reads our authority to propagate the faith of Ali in America. Islam? To propagate the faith of Allah, rather. All right? By way of peace. And what we must remember as Moorish Americans is that, first and foremost, it is our duty to promote this Moorish Divine and National Movement. But in order for us to promote a thing, in order for us to propagate a thing, we must know what that thing is. Islam? And again, it consists of establishing who we are as Moorish Americans. Islam? And establishing who we are as Moorish Americans means that we have a paradigm, we have a reality, or we have these elements out of many, just to name a few, in place. And we deliver it, we promote it from our perspective. Islam? The way that we look into that is by way of our forefathers and our foremothers. Man, masterminds trace themselves back, thus they know. Islam? All right? So, let's start with the arts. All right? So, I want to read from chapter 29, verse 8 in our Moorish Holy Qurans, and that is Magistrate and Subject, chapter 29. He smileth on the arts, and they flourish. The sciences improve beneath the culture of his hand. Islam? All right. So with that, I'm actually going to deal with sciences as a culture, of course, and the arts. Now, one of the faithful, movement known in the Moorish Science Temple of America, Temple number 19, her and I had a discussion about the arts in the realm of how nationwide, when you look at certain states and cities, so on and so forth, the state government, if you will, or officials are looking to cut back on the funding of the arts to the public schools and to the public establishments for the children. All right? That in itself is a hindrance to culture. And let me go back for a minute. When we talk about culture, we're talking about an element that preserves a people. That's what a culture is. When we look at who the people are that inhabited ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt, we look at the culture by way of the arts as well as other cultural elements that were in place. We look at how their structures, as far as their buildings. We look at the sciences, again, by way of the arts, by way of the pictograms. Because before we had a quote-unquote written language, the written language was developed by way of the arts. When we talked about our quote-unquote our kings and our queens and our noblemen and our heroes and so on and so forth, we did that verbally. We did that by way of the griots or other storytellers by way of our ancient culture, Islam. But to enforce those stories, we had the arts, Islam. So again, going back to ancient Kemet or to ancient Egypt, we had the pictograms, or some may call the hieroglyphs that showed what our ancient forefathers were doing, how they were going about promoting life, how they were going about honoring death, how they danced, how they fought, how they wrestled, so on and so forth. All of that we were able to experience and observe by way of the arts, Islam. Contrary, well, for those who don't know, the very form of written language was created by the arts. Case in point, when we go to, when we look at ancient Chinese language, if you will. In ancient Chinese culture, you had prostration, you had prayer, so on and so forth. So what they would do to show that a person was honoring Allah within, or the Creator within, or their deity, if you will, they would literally draw a picture, a stick figure of a person that was praying. Islam? And over a period of time, this stick figure, if you will, had evolved to a Chinese language, to a Chinese character. All right? This, when we talk about the arts, we talk about how did the people live? How did they perpetuate their minds? How did they cultivate their minds, rather? They did that by way of music. How did they express themselves? All right? And if you promote the arts, you're promoting the very civilization that you live in. Because when we talk about the arts, we're not just talking about the visual portion of it, or the liberal portion of it, or the entertainment aspect of it. We're talking about the components that develop buildings. Islam, and that goes into the science. That goes into, okay, I have this image of this pyramid. So how is it that I can bring this image, if you will, from papyrus and actually turn it into an actual structure? Islam? All right? And so when we have science, that goes into the development of that. Real quick, who can give me a off the top definition of science? Islam.
To know.
To know. And if I may add on, it's applied knowledge. Islam. So when we talk about science, we're talking about the action of doing so. So when we're talking about the Moorish Science Temple of America, we're talking about the Moorish paradigm, or the Moorish action of knowing. Islam? So that Moorish action of knowing is going about studying self. When we go to page 3 in our Moorish Holy Qurans, the first thing it says is, know thyself and thy Father God Allah. And that in itself is where you begin to establish the gnosis. But how is it that you develop the gnosis? You develop the gnosis by studying, by acting. Islam? By going about it, by discovering yourself. Interacting with yourself, or your brother, or your sister. Islam? By taking what's in your mind, the thoughts that are in your mind, this very structure right here, and saying, how is it that I can develop this structure to where it won't collapse? And it may collapse a couple of times, and that third or fourth time, it may develop, and it may hold, and it may be strong. Remember the first time that you built your Legos all the way up top, and it took you a while, and it wobbled for a minute, and then you got it to that first part. You got it to that point to where you built it as high as you can, and it wobbled for a little bit, and then it stood still. Imagine how you felt. Then imagine how you felt when your big brother came and smacked it down. That's culture, huh? That's brotherly love. That's brotherly or sibling love. Those are things that go into developing who we are as a people. But going back to the arts, they're looking into removing funding from the very thing that makes us who we are. How is it that we're going to leave behind us as Moorish Americans? How is it that we can do that? We can do it by literature, but the literature has to be enforced by the arts. And when I'm talking about the arts now, I'm not talking about just pictures on a wall. I'm not just talking about the music. You know what I'm saying? When we talk about the culture, we're talking about the very thing that we adhere to. In other words, it's another form of a covenant. When we talk about what a culture is. Because everyone that belongs to that nation, that belongs to that group, they're familiar with a culture. Islam?
Islam.
So, that goes into the social political part of it. All right? So, in civilization cannot survive without the civilians, simply put. But the civilians, the majority of them, it's incumbent upon them to be active. We've talked about this many times before. This is one of the primary elements within this Moorish Divine and National movement, to be active in our communities, to uplift fallen humanity. Islam? Participation. Islam. So that means, again, going back to chapter 30, if you will, if I'm reading in part, it says, you know, it is the duty, therefore, to be a friend to mankind, as it is thy interest that man should be friendly to thee. All right? So, when we see our brother and our sister in adversity, it is our responsibility to assist them the best way that we can. Now, when you assist, it's not just patching up a thing. It's not just, you know, when a brother or a sister is in need of financial support, it's not just about, you know, providing them with that temporary substance. It's about putting them in a position where they can develop it themselves. Islam. It's about putting a structure in place to where you have a statesman, not just an official, but a statesman that represents your well-being. Islam. So when we talk about what a statesman is, that's what politicians used to be called back in the day. We're talking about that representative, that person that represents the state, or a group of men or a group of women that represent the state and its interests. Islam? All right, and the interest of them is supposed to be the interest of the people. Therefore, if we were to go back to the arts, if we see that we have a government that is looking to cut funding from the arts, what are we as the people supposed to do? We're supposed to engage with that government, with those officials, with the statesmen, and come to some type of agreement or understanding to why you're looking to take away funding from the arts. And if the reason does not suffice, then we need to come to a better reconciliation. Because to destroy the arts is to destroy, again, the very thing. I believe President Roosevelt, during World War II, who remembers the movie, I want to say it's the movie Saint Anna, that was directed by Spike Lee? If it wasn't Saint Anna, it was The Fury. But in that movie, the movie itself was about World War II soldiers from the Americas, from the Allies, that were going to Germany to get pieces of art, to recover rare pieces of art. And one of the comments that were given to Roosevelt at the time was, you know, why is it that you're going to Germany to get these rare pieces of art, these paintings and so on and so forth? And he replied, and I paraphrase, he said, "This, you know, if we don't get it, if we're not going out to get the very thing that make us who we are, we're pretty much losing who we are." Islam? So, again, that's the social political piece, because you're supposed to be proud of who we are as Moorish Americans. And that pride, if you will, shows in how we treat ourselves, and how we treat each other out in the cares of the world, cleaning up the roads, making sure that there's nothing in the streets, actually protection, and we're going to get to that momentarily as well. But all these things, we owe it to each other. We owe it to yourself. You owe that to yourself. You deserve that. Islam? Now the question is, do you believe that you deserve it? Islam? All right. So now, speaking of deserving and wealth and value and so on and so forth, we talk about economy. Now, economy, let's backtrack for a minute, all right? During the age of antiquity with our ancient forefathers, there was a linear structure, if you will. You had the sultan, or the sheikh. And then there was a hierarchy going down from there. You had the group of noblemen, you had the merchants, then you had what you would call the, for lack of a better word, the peasants. That was the social class. Now, as much as we talk about the greatest heights of our forefathers, we must also talk about the greatest depths, because we also have to consider that our forefathers at that time, at their early stages of developing civilization, the right to have your own is very important. You have to leave something behind for your children. You have to leave a legacy behind for those. So that also goes into the Moorish Divine and National Movement. We as Moorish Americans, in this Moorish Divine and National Movement, we should have something to leave behind for the youth. When you pass away and you veil the form, what are you leaving back for your children? All right, let's think about that for a moment. So when we talk about economy, we're talking about putting ourselves in a position to where we're adding value to us as an individual and to us as a people. Islam? All right, so going back to ancient civilizations and so on and so forth. So we have that hierarchy. So those that were born into to being poor, and if they die, they're going to be poor. Those that are rich, if they die, they're going to leave behind family members that will be rich, and so on and so forth. Islam? All right. Now, let's fast forward to the Americas. All right. Now, there's a lot of flack that goes into the ideal of this word right here. This word people are very leery about. All right. What about this word too? Islam. Corporations, capitalism. All right. It's almost associated with the boogeyman. Things that are unknown. But be mindful, family, that we should look at this as opportunity. All right, when we look at the concept of capitalism, we're talking about the right to establish your own enterprise. Islam? We're talking about the right to establish your own corporation. The first corporations were started in around, I'm horrible with dates, forgive me, around the early 1800s when a group of men were hired by the state to develop a bridge, to build a bridge. And then after they built the bridge, then they would separate, and they would go into their own businesses, whatever it may be. And then if another contract came about, they would form together again as a corporation, as a group, as a body to develop this thing, and they would get assistance from that. Because in order for they didn't want to give that to the people, because for one, they wanted to make sure that you had someone that was skilled to build that bridge. All right, the prophet said that the information is worthy of its hire. I'm paraphrasing. So that means that if there's something that you can contribute to society, it is the demonstration of gratitude that you reciprocate that information or reciprocate that service by way of its value. Islam? All right, so in other words, the corporations at that time when they were building the bridge, they were getting paid for it because they were giving a service. But that service just wasn't for free because the supplies wasn't for free. The iron and the wood and the hammers and the nails and so on and so forth, all that stuff didn't come by way of out of the air. It had to be built. It had to be developed. It had to be paid for. When we fast forward again to today, when we talk about corporations, we're talking about genuine corporations. We're talking about a group of people that are coming together to provide a service. All right, and whether it be for-profit or non-profit, the fact that we are providing something that is rare, and I'm talking generally speaking, whether it be by way of artwork, by way of music, by way of building, by way of being a seamstress. I forgot the tailor, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. All of those are services. All of those are elements of Allah. Everybody can't do that thing. All right. So in other words, that has to be serviced out to someone. All right. So when we talk about capitalism, we're talking about the opportunity to establish something for your family without all the wordy jargon that I myself as a Libra do. Providing something for your family. All right. I say this often, that back in the day when you were working for somebody, 9 times out of 10 you were an apprentice. That means that you were sooner or later going to take over their position, or you were looking to take on that trade of your own and to start your own business. Look at Carnegie, look at J.P. Morgan, so on and so forth, just for examples. All right. That is capitalism. All right. So as much as these two words get a bad rap, if it wasn't for capitalism, we wouldn't be able, I can speak only for myself, I wouldn't be able to start up the Art of Rashid as an LLC, to have an opportunity to establish something for my children and for my family to leave behind for them so they can carry on. Exactly. If it wasn't for other things that we as Moorish Americans are doing to build something for our families, if it wasn't for that capitalism, we wouldn't have the opportunity to do that. So now the question is, now following that, it's time for us as a whole to establish a business. Islam? In the Moorish Science Temple of America, going back to our brethren over in Philly, there's a brief video online that shows that the Moorish Americans in Philly in the early 1930s, when the Prophet had built the form, you saw videos of them being very industrious, abiding by Act 7. We must be industrious. All right. So that means that every temple should have at least one business. All right. I count at least 10 people in here. So that means if 10 people can put together, $50, $100, we should be coming up with an idea to have a business, because that's what nations do. Every nation has a gross national product. China and America, who's familiar with gross national product? Who's familiar with what a gross national product is? Gross national product, let me make sure, is the total value of goods. All right? So that means everything from architecture all the way to steel working. What is it that group of people is producing and that value of that? And right now, you have China, the dollar value of their gross national product. So everything from Japanese anime to Toyota cars, that equals up to $21.37 trillion, their gross national product. U.S. is a few trillion dollars behind them. Everything from Love and Hip Hop New York all the way to Levi jeans is $18.75 trillion. All right. And then you have India following behind that with Bollywood grossing about $8.6 trillion. That's their gross national product. We as Americans, Moorish Americans, we should be contributing to that U.S. gross national product. So what is it that we're producing as Moorish Americans within this American paradigm? All right. So again, we don't have to give up our culture with that, but that actually goes into the cultures. All right. You look at there's a book called "The Rich and How They Got That Way." I know it's a long title. All right. And this is by Cynthia Grossen. All right, The Rich and How They Got That Way. And something that stuck out for me, of course, is when they mentioned that Mansa Khan Musa was by far the richest man ever. But what Cynthia Grossen mentions in her book is that Mansa got rich by allowing everyone else to get rich. Islam? All right, so he kept his money flowing by making sure that everyone else had money flowing. Islam? So it shows that we, as Moorish Americans and our ancient forefathers, that we continue to learn from that mistakes of just having, you know, a classism system, even though it still existed, but we can see traces of that. And that goes by, you know, studying our forefathers' culture. Islam? Islam. So if you have one group of people, or you have one group of Moorish Americans that are living well, and then you have another group of Moorish Americans that are not doing so well, again, we should be implementing some type of system, some type of program to where we can help these brothers out, help these sisters out. All right? That way that everyone will be able to flourish. That is what you call receiving and conferring reciprocal helps. Islam? All right, is everybody good? Islam. All right, so again, now, monetary. Every nation has some form of monetary. I had a debate with a young brother a few months ago, and he was saying that, you know, he personally believes that if we were to remove the monetary system or money, that the world would be a better place. I said, it sounds good. It sounds good in theory. But there has to be, even if there's not a quote-unquote official form of monetary exchange, you're going to, if I need a sheep, and the value of my sheep is worth 2 of my chickens, and I need that sheep to get some wool for my family, or whatever it may be, I'm going to exchange that because someone else needs that. That is a monetary form. The Songhai Empire, their form of monetary system at one point was salt. Islam. So they were trading salts. They had a huge salt mine that was going on, and then later on it went to gold. All right. So my point is, we have to establish some form of trade, even if it's amongst ourselves, the bartering system. All right. But we can't just stop at that. So this has to work hand in hand. All right. This is how you get your Chinatowns. This is how you get your little Indias. This is how you get your little Italys. Islam? You get that by establishing a firm economy. But again, going back to the most important thing is establishing a business for the Moorish Americans. All right? Establishing some form of residual income, because this is an organization. All right? So an organization has to be funded. All right? Our Prophet Noble Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, and said that we cannot attain the highest form of spirituality without economic independence. Islam? I say that again. So basically, meditation is going to be pretty hard if you know that the rent is due. But I guarantee you'll be able to astroplane and go talk to your ancestors and all sorts of things when you know that them lights going to be on once you cut them back on after you meditate. Islam? So, then we go into education. And we're not just talking about, just 1 + 1 = 2, so on and so forth. We're talking about establishing the Moorish American paradigm. The Prophet says in order for us to change the people, we have to change literature. All right? So in other words, we have to learn the same way our ancient forefathers had learned and how they developed. All right? The Prophet said that the reason or the concept of the Negro or the simple fact that the so-called Negro doesn't have an official name. We're given so many names from the folk all the way up to colored people is an act of European psychology. I touched on that briefly a few holy nights ago, where we talked about it's the concept of purging. The Prophet said purity must pave the way for love. All right? So in other words, we have to be pure in thought. We have to have the mindset of our forefathers. All right, going back to the economy. We have to, the mindset of our forefathers is that whether we have a building, whether we have a street, whether we have an apartment complex, or a whole neighborhood, or a whole city, we had an economy.
That's right.
All right?
That's right.
We were able to siphon our money, our monetary forms, cycle it so many times that the city itself would flourish. All right? The fact that we do not have that, and I'm even speaking for myself, is that because we are still, to a certain degree, suffering or still purging, rather, a form of European psychology.
That's right.
All right?
Right.
And we have to, and this is the importance of education. Support your sheiks from the Moorish Science Temple of America. All right? Support the faithful, the ones who study the Prophet and give their demonstration based on their portion. Based on their portion of knowledge.
That's right.
All right? Support them, because what they're doing is they're sharing with you and they're giving you a portion of the Moorish American paradigm. They're showing you how your forefathers thought. They're showing you the mindset of your forefathers. So you can go back to the mindset of your forefathers. Islam? And it's very important. All right? Also, I know I keep going back to economy, but you know, when we talk about you know, how is it that, you know, studying history or coming to coming to the Moorish Science Temple of America, if you will, how is that going to help me to, you know, to pay my rent? How is it going to, you know, make sure I put food on the table for my family? For one, it surrounds you with people of like minds.
That's right.
All right? Because again, you know, the best way, you know, if you surround yourself with people that want to be prosperous financially, then you're going to develop around them people. When was the last time you got money around people that were broke? All right? Ibn Haliym, he is one of our Moorish historians, if you will. Look him up. Ibn Haliym, he stated that in 1951 ACE, they were people in the Songhai Empire writing checks. All right? So in other words, we had a bank. All right? So again, all of this goes into culture. We're talking about, okay, Moorish Americans, we don't have a culture. Well, the culture has to be initiated by the members. It has to be initiated by those who have faith in the Prophet and believe in that destiny which is not uncertain or unknown. All right? That is having faith in yourself, willing to invest in your people, willing to invest in you. Islam? And again, that takes education. So how would we know that? How would we know that without our Moorish forefathers, that our Moorish forefathers were writing checks, that they had banks? How would we know that? So now we should be able to take those elements, both the positive and the negative, because we can learn from our forefathers as well, and say, how did they go about doing that? How did they go about establishing a bank, businesses, and so on and so forth, you know, within that, so that they were a self-sufficient economy, that there was a self-sufficient community? How did they go about doing it? Teaching. Prophet said that we are to teach our people their nationality. Right. So that means we are to educate them. And educating them doesn't mean just writing the stuff on the board and giving them a history lesson. That's also being the message that you bring. Islam? All right. Then we go into defense. All right. As one of our gracious vanguards stated, you can't keep what you can't protect. All right? Prophet said that we are vanguards of this Moorish divine and national movement. We are protectors of the culture.
That's right.
All right? You can't be a protector of something you don't know anything about.
Islam.
Islam?
Islam.
How is it that when someone comes to you and says, well, what is this Moorish Science Temple of America? What is it about? You know, because abroad, you have other people that think that you're really, you're taking other people's stuff and making it your own. So they're saying that you don't even have a history. They're standing on the fact that you are descendants of slaves. That's misdirection. Misdirection. In today's society, the biggest concept is diversity. Diversity. Everybody's all in. We're just one big happy family, one big melting pot, equality for all. But if that is the truth, then why is it that you're not allowing me to establish who I am? Why is it that you're not allowing me, or you're attempting to stagger or stifle my appreciation for my foremothers and my forefathers? Islam? Why are you saying that out of all the people that live in this planet Earth, that I'm the lowest of the low? That you're claiming that I'm the lowest of the low. And then you say, well, all right, you're not the lowest of the low. You had this little spot right here, this place called Egypt, then after that, y'all just crap in the bucket. Then the worst part about it is that we believe Islam. So how are you to defend that when you don't know that you come from a great bloodline of those who had a major contribution to the society, the world.
That's law.
All right? To the world. So when we're talking about defending, we're not just talking about boots on the ground, but at the same time I am talking about boots on the ground, because you have to stand firm. Don't let anybody knock you off your square. Islam? It's very important that we defend this movement. It's very important that we defend our prophet. And amongst other things, it's very important that we defend our faith in Allah. Because if we're not defending our faith in Allah, then we have no faith. Islam? So, all of that, amongst many things, goes into the establishment of developing culture, goes into promoting and propagating this Moorish divine and national movement. Islam? Do we have any questions? All is well?
All's truly well.
All praises are due to Allah. I thank you for hearing a portion of knowledge based on my studies, if you will.